afternoon all, my name's Georgina Thomas and I work for Trow Nutrition. So you may know a little bit of Trow Nutrition from our sort of mineral and premix days, but we're also a manufacturer of milk replacer as well. On top of that, we do a large amount of research. So I'm here today to discuss LifeStart and the science behind the concept. So the global farming challenge is we need to feed the 9 billion by 2050. And there's a few factors we need to consider. There's the pressure to become more sustainable. So resources such as land and water availability are finite. And there's also the pressure from consumers really, and from the industry as a whole, to improve animal health and welfare. So there's a couple of things there that we really do need to consider when thinking about sustainability and longevity. So the aim as an agricultural industry really should be to help to find natural and sustainable methods to improve health and productivity wherever we can. So this is where the LifeStart concept really comes in. LifeStart has been sort of pulled together with resources and experts on animal nutrition, animal health, and also on practical farm management as well. So there's a number of different things that have come together to form the LifeStart programme. The most important thing I must stress is that LifeStart is a programme. It's a calf and heifer rearing programme, and it's not simply a product. So there's not a silver bullet that we can offer to help solve calf and heifer rearing issues. It's really a programme and a sequence of things that must happen. So what exactly is LifeStart? LifeStart is a programme that is trying to define a proven methodology for rearing healthy calves that become more productive cows. It's quantifying and promoting calf rearing best practice in a number of different areas, which I'll touch on later. And the most important thing that I really should highlight and I really should focus on here is that it's underpinned by science and ongoing research. I'll also discuss this later with a couple of slides, but we've got a calf and beef research centre, and we've also got a 5-year research project going on looking at specifically calf and heifer rearing and how we can influence the future productivity of that calf in that early weaning phase. The next thing that we need to consider is the milk replacer and the product that we're feeding. So through our extensive research, we have developed a specific formulation matrix so that we can develop a calf milk replacer that we know is safe to feed at high levels if we're trying to push for growth rates, but also the nutrient profile is adequate for that calf. So we are feeding that fast growing calf, and that's something that we really need to consider. So metabolic programming is a completely natural biological phenomenon that has been around for years. If you look into the research, there's lots of research looking into rats and mice. It's also a mechanism that has clearly been seen in women following the Second World War. But there is an aspect of metabolic programming that we really don't understand. So we know what it does, but we don't really understand the exact biological mechanism behind it. So that's what we're trying to develop and research further as we speak. So it is thought that the principle behind metabolic programming is something that we call epigenetics. So epigenetics is how we can influence the expression of that genetic code without changing anything within that genome. So for example, how we can have an external influence, such as nutrition, that can change how those genes are expressed and how those genes are shown in an animal without actually making any genetic changes. So what we're really doing is exploiting the genetic potential of that animal rather than trying to make any changes. So through our LifeStart trials, which I'll touch on a little bit later, as I said, we are trying to discover and investigate the exact mechanism behind metabolic programming. Because if we understand that, then we can exploit it further and we can proceed with research even further as well. As I said, metabolic programming and the theme of epigenetics isn't new. These are just two Time magazine covers. So how the first 9 months shape the rest of your life is one headline, and how and why your DNA isn't necessarily your destiny. So we've got the genetics in our calf, and we need to make sure that we're exploiting those genetics so that we're fulfilling the potential performance of that animal. So to make this quite simple, a really nice way of explaining it is to use an example. So if we look at the honeybee as a clear example, we have the queen bee and we have the worker bee within a colony of bees. Genetically, those animals are identical. There's no difference. You could say they're clones almost. The difference is that queen bee receives royal jelly, which is a nutrient-dense feed. Due to that, her sort of early life nutrition, she becomes much larger, she lives for much longer, and she becomes sexually reproductive. So that's a clear example of how nutrition can have an epigenetic effect on an animal. So that queen bee, her genetics are being expressed differently to that worker bee, but essentially the DNA is the same. So as I explained, metabolic programming and epigenetics is really when we look at the phenotype of an animal, which is what is shown, how those genetics are showing, that it is a combination of genotype, which is the genetic code, but also the environmental effects as well. So with calf rearing, we really need to consider the genetics of that animal, but also the environment. So we're looking at things like nature versus nurture, which is a common phrase that you will hear. So as we know, and as many studies have shown, the critical period in calf rearing is that first 8 to 9 weeks, that first pre-weaning phase. We have shown through various research and various different R&D facilities have shown that it's during that first 8 to 9 week period that you can have that potential effect on the expression of genes. Once that window is passed, you miss that opportunity. So we really need to ensure that we're hitting that calf with the correct nutrition at the correct levels within that first pre-weaning phase. We can't think we will have a look at her when we need to get her growing in time for bulling. We've missed the genetic opportunity there. So it's really this pre-weaning phase that is absolutely essential. And the more research that we do, the clearer it becomes that it's the first early weeks in a calf's life that really is vital. As we know, calf rearing and management of calf rearing is almost a circle. So we need to offer quality nutrition in order to achieve strong growth. And good health is often the part of the circle that is most difficult to influence on farm. So for that reason, and as part of the LifeStart programme, we are offering 5 critical control points of calf rearing that need to be considered. So as I mentioned, LifeStart is not a product, it's a programme, and it's a number of different things and a number of different best practices we need to consider to make sure that we're getting the best performance out of our animals. So for the first one, it's cleanliness. So as we know, calves are very vulnerable at birth. They're born basically without an immune system, and so they're very vulnerable for infections and pathogens. Therefore, we need to ensure that we're minimising the risk of transmission of any bacterial pathogens that can affect health and performance. So strict protocols, hygiene protocols, washing water buckets, washing milk buckets, changing teats, making sure we're using the correct detergent, simple protocols like working from the youngest calf to the oldest calf. All those things are things that we need to be considering when rearing calves on farm. The second one is colostrum, which I'm sure everyone talks about now with regards to calf nutrition, and I don't think you can ever do a presentation without talking about colostrum. But colostrum is that nutrient-dense feed that is essential for calf performance and calf health and calf immune status within those first few weeks, and I've got a couple of slides which I'll touch on that. But best practice and our advice would be try and feed 10% of body weight within the first 6 hours. As we know with colostrum, there's a number of different things to consider. So there's colostrum quality, there's the timing of the feed of colostrum, and there's also things like colostrum cleanliness. So there's multiple things that we need to consider with colostrum, but it really is vital and has a huge effect on performance. So comfort is the third C, and when we're talking about comfort, we're talking about the environment. So it being dry, it being bright, it being well ventilated. So simple things like we know a calf will spend 17 to 19 hours of its day lying down. Therefore, we need to make sure that that area is comfortable and appropriate for that amount of time. If the calf is lying down, she's resting and she's not using energy for keeping herself warm or keeping herself dry. So a clean, dry bedding is really essential. You'll often see people doing the drop knee test in a calf bed, the 2-minute test, that if you can drop on your knees and if you can come back up and your knees are dry, then it's fine. If you're coming back and your knees are wet or soiled, then something needs to be done about it. With regards to comfort, people often talk about calf nesting scores. So you can see and you can evaluate calf bedding depth and calf and bedding quality when looking at nesting scores, how snuggled a calf is in that straw. That's an important thing to consider as well. So the next thing down is calories. So how are we supplying that nutrition to that calf? So as I mentioned, we really want to be exploiting the genetic potential of that calf. Therefore, we really need to be feeding nutrition in by an efficient method. So we want to be feeding a high quality milk replacer that's formulated with that fast growing calf in mind. And we really should be, as part of the LifeStart programme, we would suggest 150 grams a litre as a concentration with a minimum of 900 grams being fed. So if you're feeding a high quality milk replacer at 900 grams per head per day, you can be expecting that 800 gram daily live weight gain on your calf. But quality of milk replacer is really important. And you will see, as I've explained, we have a specific formulation matrix, and you'll see there are products on the market that have sort of a LifeStart logo on the bag, which means that they're of high quality, and the formulation matrix has been considered when taking that product into account. The last C that falls into the critical control points is consistency. Calves thrive on consistency and they thrive on a routine. So simple things like feeding times should be consistent from day to day. If it's not the same person feeding the calves every single day, then there should be some protocols so the same things are followed. When we're thinking about milk powder concentrations and amount of powder fed, are we confident that what we're feeding is in line with what we expect to be feeding? So for example, if we've got a heaped jug, are we confident that that is 150 grams a litre or 900 grams a day? Maybe a set of scales will enable us to track powder intakes more closely. Are we feeding and mixing at the same temperature every day? Just simple things like that often need to be considered to make sure consistency of feeding is there. Consistency of feeding, if it's not there in a system, can cause calves to become stressed, and we know that stressed calves can become sick quite quickly. So those 5 C's, and there's numerous information and discussions we can have on each of those 5 C's, but they're really the basis of the LifeStart programme, and the basis of best practice around each of those points should really be followed to ensure calf performance on farm.